A quiet highway, a coffee-stained map, and one sentence from my husband's brother that flipped years of assumptions on their head. I thought I knew Vincent, stoic, distant, always a step outside our family circle. On that trip, he told me the truth he'd been carrying, and it changed how I saw my marriage, my in-laws, and myself. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments, New York, Phoenix, Des Moines, wherever you call home. It helps me picture this conversation traveling across the map, one porch light at a time. We started before sunrise because that's how Vincent does things. He's a leave before the traffic, trust the early light kind of man. I slid into the passenger seat with a thermos of black coffee and a paper bag of biscuits. The car smelled like pine air freshener and old leather warmed by the years. The dashboard glow was the color of amber, and the road yawned out in front of us, a gray ribbon with mile markers like quiet metronomes. I'm Theresa, 51, not as nimble as I used to be but stubborn in the ways that matter. I had packed snacks and directions. He had packed silence and a toolkit. It felt balanced. This wasn't supposed to be our trip. My husband was called out to deal with a last-minute issue at work, and the family needed someone to drive down, pick up a box of documents from the attorney, and check on the condo our aunt had left behind. It's mostly paperwork, my husband had said, kissing my forehead, and the keys with the neighbor. Vincent offered to go with you. He'd said it lightly, like it wasn't a big deal. But I heard what it meant. Years of small distances between me and Vincent, squeezed into a moving metal box for a long day on the road. For the first hour, the radio did the talking. The weatherman promised storms across 3 counties by noon. Vincent drove with that steady competence you only get from hard jobs and long days. Hands at 10 and 2, eyes always scanning. Watching him in profile, I saw the lines near his eyes and the careful way he checked his mirrors. He looked like a man who took responsibility seriously, maybe too seriously. I coasted my coffee between my palms and let the heat work its way into my fingers. "You doing okay?" he asked finally, still looking straight ahead. "I'm fine," I said, which of course meant more than it sounded. "You?" "Fine," he echoed, and if you know the men of a certain generation, you know that fine can be 1,000 different things with all the edges sanded off. The clouds thickened, dragging threads of shadow across fields and small towns. We stopped at a gas station with a flickering open sign and a bell on the door that announced us like we were celebrities. Inside, everything was familiar, like a postcard. Racks of chips, a cooler humming, a lady at the counter who said "hon" without looking up from her crossword. Vincent bought windshield washer fluid, and I grabbed 2 bananas, because somewhere I'd read that bananas keep the talking friendly. When we got back in the car, he reached for the washer lever and said, almost to the glass, "Theresa, can I ask you something, and can I be straight about it?" There was a weight to the way he said my name. It sounded like a promise and a warning together. "If I can be straight back," I said, and I meant it. Consent for honesty is a 2-way street. He nodded once. That's the only way this works. We drove in silence for several miles, the wipers keeping time. I thought about all the moments with him that felt like stepping carefully across a creek, choosing each stone, testing each move. When my husband and I bought our house, Vincent had helped with the porch steps and left the day of the housewarming before the cake was cut. When my mother-in-law had her hip replaced, he sat in the waiting room with a magazine he didn't read. He always showed up, but he stayed on the outer edge of the picture. I never knew why. "You thought I didn't like you," he said. Not a question. An autopsy of years. I could tell you thought that. The road narrowed for construction, cones standing like sentries. "I thought you were." Careful with me, I said, like there was something I hadn't earned. He let out a breath. It wasn't you. That's when the rain started proper, like someone unzipped the sky. He clicked the wipers up a notch, leaned forward a fraction. His hands tightened a little on the wheel. I didn't dislike you, he said, the words arriving like freight. Truth is, I didn't trust myself to be fair about anything. Not with the history, not with what I knew, so I kept quiet. What history? I asked, but gently. I was learning the rhythm of his honesty. It needed patience the way bread needs time to rise. We pulled off at a roadside diner with a neon coffee cup that winked in the rain. Inside was a world I know by heart. The squeak of red vinyl seats, the smell of bacon, the clink of cups. We sat at the counter because booths felt too private for a conversation that was trying to be brave. The waitress called him Sir and me Sweetheart, and she put our mugs down like she was blessing us. He wrapped his big hands around the coffee. I helped your husband once, he said, eyes on the swirl of steam. Years ago, way before the porch steps. He got cornered by a loan he didn't tell you about. It wasn't gambling, nothing like that. Just pride. A bad bid at work that didn't pay off. He didn't want to worry you. He asked me to help. I did, but I told him that debt has a way of growing in the dark. If you don't shine a light on it, it crawls up the walls. I kept my face still because the room felt delicate, the way a snow globe feels when you turn it, and it's all sparkle and silence. I didn't know, I said, and that sentence tasted like tin and like relief at the same time. He wanted to tell you, Vincent said. I told him to. But he asked me to keep quiet until he fixed it, and then life piled on like it does. It got easy not to bring it up, easier than doing the right thing. I resented that. I resented him for putting me in the middle, and I resented you by accident, because you were where the truth should have gone and didn't. I looked at him, really looked, at the nicks on his knuckles, the way the muscles in his jaw moved when he was weighing words. He wasn't a cold man. He was a careful man. And careful men can look like cold men until the door is opened from the inside. You bailed us out, I said softly. And then you held onto a secret you didn't want. He nodded. I figured if I kept my distance, I couldn't mess up the balance you two had. Felt like the least I could do. But distance isn't neutral. It says things. The waitress slid our plates in front of us. Eggs, toast, the kind of bacon that crumbles into honest pieces. I put syrup on my toast because that's what I do when I'm trying to convince myself I still have choices. Outside, trucks hissed past and the windows fogged up just enough that we were two people inside a little room in the world, maybe for the first time. I'm not angry, I said, surprised to realize it was true. I'm grateful, and a little sad that we've been living with the wrong story between us for so long. He let out a laugh that was almost a sigh. I'm not proud of how I handled it. I thought staying quiet would protect everybody. It protected nobody, especially not me. Why tell me now? I asked. He looked out at the rain, then back at me. Because we're driving to pick up a box of papers that represent the tail end of a life, he said. And I'm tired of pretending that time waits for us to be ready. Also because your husband asked me last week if I thought he should finally tell you. I said yes. Then he got called into that mess at work, and I realized I've been using other people's timing as a hiding place. There it was. The sentence that would have saved us years, delivered at a counter with a sugar caddy between us. My husband wanted to tell me. Vincent had wanted him to tell me. Life had rolled us down a hill until we ended up here, eating eggs with the truth sitting on the stool between us like a third companion who'd finally gotten tired of standing. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Not just for what you did back then. For this, right now." He nodded, and I saw his shoulders drop a fraction. "You deserved the truth," he said. And I needed to be a man who said it. We ate the way people do after they set down something heavy. Not smiling exactly, but lighter. When we got back into the car, the rain had softened to a steady patter that made the world look washed and new. The road seemed smaller in a good way, manageable, like a to-do list you can finally see the bottom of. "We have more to talk about," I said as the tires hummed back up to speed. "Not just about the loan. About what distance does to people. About what your mother's illness did to all of us. About how we divided chores like we were slicing a pie with a dull knife." "Yeah," he said. "We do." He told me things I hadn't known, how he would swing by our place early on winter mornings, shovel our walk before we woke up, then drive to work in boots that stayed wet until noon. How he'd almost called me once from a parking lot outside a hardware store, rehearsed it even. "Theresa, I think you should know." But hung up because a man he respected had walked by and waved, and he'd lost the nerve. He told me he'd been divorced for 2 years before we knew, not because he wanted to keep it private, but because saying it out loud made him feel like he'd failed at a job he took seriously. I told him about my mom's habit of folding worry into action, how I'd inherited it, how it made me overdo and under-ask. We traded pieces of ourselves like neighbors swapping tools. "Use this, it'll fit the bolt we're trying to turn." By the time we hit the county line, the sky shredded to patches of blue. We made good time, picked up the key from the neighbor who talked like every sentence had an extra comma, and let ourselves into the condo. It smelled like lemon polish and quiet. The box of documents waited on the kitchen table. Deeds, letters, an old photo with the corners softened by thumbs. Vincent held the photo up. His mother, young and stern. His father's hand on her shoulder. The brothers in the background, one taller, one wider, both trying out a smile they hadn't learned yet. "I used to think honesty was a hammer," he said. "You bring it down and fix a thing. These days I wonder if it's more like light. You set it in a room and see what's there. Then the fixing comes." We packed everything carefully, labeling folders with our neatest pest. We moved the 2 lawn chairs from the closet to the tiny balcony and sat looking at the strip of ocean like it was a live painting. The breeze smelled like salt and something metallic, like a handful of coins. He took off his cap and ran a hand through hair that had never quite decided on a color. "I'm going to tell him I told you," he said. "I'll tell him I should have pushed harder years ago, and that I'm done standing outside pictures I belong in. I'm going to tell him thank you," I said. "And I'm going to tell him I want us to be the kind of people who say hard things before they calcify." We sat with that, letting the surf write its ancient sentences and erase them. I realized, with the kind of relief that tastes like clean water, that I didn't have to hold anyone at arm's length to keep my balance. I could stand closer and still be steady. On the drive back, we didn't fill every silence. We let some ride in the back seat, buckled in. We noticed a roadside peach stand, a church sign that said Hopi was A-H-A-B-T, a field where 4 horses stood like exclamation points. Vincent told a story about a job he once took fixing a porch in August heat, how the old man who lived there brought out popsicles and called him Buddy even though he was 40. I told him about the summer I taught myself to tile the bathroom and ended up learning how to forgive crooked lines. We pulled into my driveway just as the sky started to think about evening. The porch light clicked on automatically, painting the steps he'd once built with a glow that felt like a benediction. We carried the box inside and set it on the dining table, the same table where we'd celebrated anniversaries and argued about nothing and everything the same table where bills were paid and calls were made and bread was shared. At the door, Vincent hesitated. "Can I say one more thing?" "You can say two," I said. "I'm sorry," he said, "for my distance. It was a kind of cowardice dressed up like caution. And I'm proud of you. You've kept this family glued together in ways we don't deserve. The thing about apology, when it's real, is that it lands softly, but it lands. I felt it touch down somewhere behind my ribs. Thank you, I said. And I'm sorry I never asked what was under your quiet. He nodded, touched the brim of his cap like a man in an older movie might, and headed to his truck. I stood on the porch, listening to the engine turn over, feeling the evening gather itself like a shawl around my shoulders. Inside the house, our phone would ring later, and my husband would say he'd be home late, but he loved me, and he hoped the drive went smoothly. I would tell him yes, it did, and also we should talk. We should really talk. If you've ever had a day where the road itself seemed to nudge you toward the truth, then you know how I felt when I locked the door and turned off the porch light. Lighter without being empty. Braver without being hard. Ready to stop treating the truth like a guest that needed special plates and start treating it like family. I know this isn't the kind of shock most people expect when they hear a title like mine. But sometimes the most shocking thing is finding out you've been loved, quietly and imperfectly, by people who didn't know how to say it. And the most surprising part is realizing you can learn to say it together, even now. That was the drive when Vincent decided honesty wasn't a hammer. It was the light we needed. Tomorrow, I'd sit with my husband at this table and hold that light between us. But that's a story for another stretch of road. The morning after that long drive with Vincent, I woke up with the box of documents still sitting on the dining table, like a silent guest. The house was unusually quiet. My husband had stayed late at the office and hadn't come home until after midnight. By the time he slipped into bed, I was already halfway between dreams and wakefulness, still carrying Vincent's words in my chest. I made coffee the way I always do. 2 scoops, water to the line, that faint hiss and drip that fills the kitchen like background music. The smell alone was enough to pull me back into the conversation at the diner. Vincent's hands around his mug, the way his voice cracked open something I hadn't realized had been locked away. When my husband came down the stairs, his tie already around his neck, I felt a knot in my stomach. I looked at him, not just as my husband of 25 years, but as the man who had once asked his brother to carry a secret for him. "Morning," he said, sliding into the chair. "Coffee smells good." I set a mug in front of him, then sat across with my own. The air between us was steady but heavy. "We need to talk," I said. He froze just slightly, the way a man does when he knows exactly which corner he's about to turn. His eyes went to the box, then back to me. "He told you." "He did," I said. "And I'm glad he did." He looked down, turning the mug in his hands. "I should have told you years ago, Theresa. I was ashamed. I thought if I could just fix it, you'd never need to know. But that's not how marriage is supposed to work, is it?" I took a breath, feeling the steam from my cup curl against my face. "It's not, but you're not the only one who's kept things quiet. I've done it too, just in different ways." That surprised him. His head lifted, eyes searching. "Like what?" I thought about the little ways I'd hidden disappointment, how I'd masked my loneliness when he stayed late at the office, how I'd played the strong one when my mother passed, never asking for him to sit with me through the ache. Silence isn't always about lies. Sometimes it's about pride. Sometimes it's fear that asking too much will tip the balance. "Like how I've let you think I never needed more time with you," I said softly. "I've been guilty of distance too." He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. It wasn't dramatic, just steady, warm, familiar. "Then maybe we both need to start being louder," he said. That day, we went through the documents together. Deeds, letters, bank statements, all the pieces of a life measured in paper. We spoke about small things at first. Who would handle which calls, what needed filing, which papers should go to the attorney. But between those tasks, the bigger truths crept in. He admitted how deeply he'd leaned on Vincent over the years, more than he'd ever let me see. I admitted how grateful I was that his brother had stepped in, even if it created walls between us. For the first time, we spoke of Vincent not just as the helper in the shadows, but as part of us, part of this family fabric that had frayed in silence. In the evening, Vincent came by to collect a few things from the box that needed notarizing. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in his hands, like a boy about to confess something again. My husband greeted him, and for a moment I thought I might be watching two men circling the same truth from different angles. "You told her?" my husband asked. Vincent nodded. "I did. Had to. You were right." My husband exhaled and clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Then maybe it's time I told you thank you. For everything. Even for the silence you carried for me." The three of us ended up sitting at that dining table, the documents pushed aside, the coffee pot drained twice. We talked about the past, about mistakes, about how pride and silence had carved a canyon where there should have been a bridge. There were moments of laughter, too, like remembering the porch steps that leaned slightly to the left because they measured once and cut twice in the wrong order. By the time the night grew thick and Vincent left, the air in the house felt different. Lighter. As though the truth had opened windows we hadn't touched in years. Later, when I lay down beside my husband, he reached for my hand without words. His grip was strong, not out of fear, but out of something firmer. An intention. I realized then that honesty wasn't just Vincent's lesson. It was ours, too. And as I drifted toward sleep, I thought about that drive, that diner, and how sometimes the most unexpected honesty doesn't break families apart. Sometimes it stitches them closer. Because shocking as it was, the truth didn't end anything. It began something new.